right, if you would, give us your name and spell it for
Okay.
us.
My name is Delois Daniels Easily Lee. Delois, capital Delois. Daniels, capital Daniels. Easily, capital Easley. Lee, capital Lee.
Okay, Mrs. Lee, do you give us permission to use this video in the archives here and other historical archives, and that you give us permission to use it as a historical record in the media?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hold on. Okay, Mrs. Lee, you grew up on Southside. Tell me about growing up on Southside.
Oh, yes. We all grew up on, everyone that has spoken before, we all grew up on Southside. And I was born in 1946. And it was a family of 5 children, my mother and my grandmother. And my father occasionally would be in and out. So that's how many people were in our one home. It was 8, 7, sometimes 8.
Okay, tell me about what it was like living on the South Side.
Okay, when it was living on the South Side, as everyone had said, it was like a big family, a community. Actually, because I think we were so close. The houses were not, we couldn't reach out and touch, but they were very close, and we only had maybe 3 or 4 streets in our neighborhood. So you would either live on one of those 4 streets, and we didn't venture out much past the area. So that's one reason we got along. And if my parents didn't have something, there was nothing thought of go to Geraldine's house and get a cup of grits, and you take these sausages to her, or take this cheese to her. And it was like more or less, I guess, on the barter system, not really on the barter system, but I guess it was food-wise. And there was nothing said about it. There was nothing done about it. I guess the parents agreed this is how it would be, and that's how it was. Kids didn't say anything about it. Parents didn't say anything. There was no gossiping. We had no phones back then. I guess that was one reason that there wasn't much talking about. But parents did gather together. I remember in the summer when it was, harvest time for peas or butter beans. I really didn't like it, but my grandmother made sure that we sat on the porch. And she would bring in peas one day, corn one day, butter beans, something one day. And we had a garden also that we had to plant, pull the weeds, harvest. We even had corn, we even had sugar cane, and a couple of rows she had, that was just for our pleasure. So we even had sugar cane that we enjoyed, which was a pleasure because wasn't much bought, especially like vegetables. We all were kind of self-sustaining ourselves like that.
Now tell me about your experience in school and church in the neighborhood.
Okay, in school, we attended Alice Street School, and Alice Street School had 2 rooms, and it was separated by a pool partition. First graders, all the first graders that lived in that area went to the first grade there. Mrs. Robbie B. West was our teacher. She taught all the first graders. On the other side of the partition were the 2nd and 3rd graders. And the 2nd and 3rd graders, that one room was divided into sections by rows, like maybe if there was 10 seats in the first row, there was 10 in the second, and there was a space between those 2 for the 3rd graders. So second the second graders sat in the first two, I guess, and the third graders sat in the last two. And our teacher was Mrs. At that time, she was Mrs. Morrison, but then she later married and she became Mrs. Randall Kinney. And we lived, well, before she and her husband passed, basically when I'm an adult in the same neighborhood, I could look out my back door into her back door. But she and her husband has passed now, but they were great pillars of community at that time.
Okay, what church? Tell me about the churches.
Church, I attended New Bethel Baptist Church, one of the three churches in the neighborhood. If you were Baptist, everybody that was Baptist attended New Bethel Baptist Church. And I remember, I think we had a pastor, I think his name was Reverend Fields. But anyway, he was the only pastor that I really remember being. I'm sure we probably had another one. But he was one of the pastors there. He preached. I remember, like on special holidays like Easter, my grandmother had made my sisters and I dresses for Easter. I had this nice, I remember vividly, it was an orange dress. She had gone down to a store downtown called Bloomberg's. I remember going to Bloomberg's, and we didn't go that often, but I liked going to Bloomberg's because it had an escalator. And she would get like these big can slips. She made our dresses out of material called organdy. It was a light fabric, real pretty. And she put collars on it, lace after lace after lace. So one Easter, I went to church, and I wanted to spread my dress out so it could just be, I was just so proud of my dress and all my lace. And we went to church Sunday school. So when my parents came, my grandmother came, and my mother came, and all the rest of the family came to church, I had my dress all sprawled out, my legs crossed. I was just sitting like a young little lady. So my grandmother came in, and some of the adults came in. You have to move that dress in because Miss So-and-so has to sit here. And that was not really nice with me, but I had to do. So I had to move my dress in. So I don't know who it was, but she had to sit next to us. So I really wasn't happy that Easter because that dress had to come in. And but basically, she did all the sewing. My grandmother was named Letha Sistrunk, and she could not read or write. As a matter of fact, later on we found out, we really never found a birth certificate, a legal birth certificate, but we did find out by way of census report, the census report that we found that she was born in 1900. We're not sure if that's correct, but that is about as close as we could find of her age. But like I said, she could not read, she could not write, but she could count her money. When she sent us to the store for something, she knew we had to walk to the A&P. I remember the A&P being on West Main Street, on the corner of West Main Street and South Oaks, I believe that's where it was. And she gave us a list. She didn't write anything down. We wrote very little down, but we brought back exactly what she told us to bring back. And then she knew if she had change, then she would say, "Where is my change?" And she knew exactly how much she was supposed to have. Her change should have been. We had an ice box at our house, and sometimes we would get ice from the iceman. Then sometimes we would have to take that red wagon that we had and go across town and pick up the ice. And I remember the ice plant being somewhere right off East Main Street, and can't remember the other street that it was. But we took that, we had some material, burlap or something that we had to cover the ice. And the ice made it back. It wasn't ice cubes, it was a big chunk of ice. I I think it came in pounds, maybe. I'm not sure. But the ice made it back home and it got in the ice box. And that's how we had ice. And also, I remember we had this garden. I don't like corn, but my grandmother, evidently she loved corn. She planted a lot of corn. So she would can some of the corn when it was fresh. Then she let some would get real dry, and we had to cut the corn off the kernel, and we had to take the corn that we took off the kernel and take it back over, maybe not far from the ice plant, and they made meal, took the corn, and they made meal, and that was our meal that we had when we did not go to the store to purchase meal. So I remember that. And I also remember walking from after we had finished first, second, and third grade on Southside. On the fourth grade, fifth, and sixth, we had to walk. I'm gonna say, I was a little kid then. I'm gonna say it was about maybe a mile and a half, maybe 2 miles from where we lived on 605 West Franklin Street to Montana Street School. We had to walk, but usually we did it as a group. It was usually everybody that was in the fourth grade had to walk. So we all were together and we all walked, and normally we all came back unless someone didn't have homework or were tardy or something happened at school. Then you had to, because we had chores to do after we finished school. So we all walked together. That was another way of becoming very close with our neighbors and friends, and talked and sometimes we sang, had games or whatever that made the journey a little better. But I have one other thing that I would like to say. We had one particular day. I was alone. I don't know why I was alone coming from school that day, but I was alone. I had problems with my eyes. Maybe I had an eye doctor appointment. I'm not sure why I was alone that day, but I had a baby brother. His name was Byron Charles Daniels. I'm 10 years older than him. I was born in 1946. Byron was born in 1956. And when on my way home, we had to walk through, I call it a field, maybe it was a pasture. They had like a small little dip in it. And we walked past that little dip to come up to South Street. As I came up out of the field to South Street, there was this one lady. She sat there every day, and she said, "Your brother is dead." And so he was just a baby, but not knowing, not having much money. He passed away from something very simple now, that babies don't pass away from that. All she had to do was stop giving him the milk or diluting the milk, and I think he would have been okay. I don't remember this. I did know the name, but I forgot because I was a nurse, but I can't remember right now. And that was one of the things that I remember that I think I won't forget that. And that's been several years ago, over 50-something years ago. But I still remember that, and I remember that words do hurt. Back in the day, sometimes adults was very kind. Some weren't, so, just like now. And they would say most anything to you, not really thinking that, well, she's just a kid. He's just a kid, it doesn't matter. But words hurt. So we need to be careful what we say to our kids, grandkids. I have great grandkids. And I think I kind of spoiled them somewhat. But to sum it all up, living on Southside was a great experience. Like I said, we were close because there was a need to be close. You know, there was not much choice not to be close. We shared practically everything, like I said, that we had. Dad was in and out. In my home it was. So my mom did housework. I will never forget. She was a housekeeper for one of the lieutenant governor of the state of Alabama. His name was Guy Hardwick. And my grandmother did housework for, I don't know, I can't remember. All I remember is his name was Mr. Marley. I don't know what his first name, but anyway, all I know is just Mr. Marley. Both of them did housework. And it was very good because sometimes my mom, when she worked for the Hardwicks, she got an opportunity to go to the beach with them. She would go down and they would have, I guess, company over, guests over. And she would go down, prepare all the foods. She would clean and whatever they needed at the beach. And we had an opportunity then to she would bring some of the things back from the beach. Because I don't think prior to that, we never went to Panama City Beach, even though it was only a short distance. But we did enjoy some of the partake of the meals that they had down there. She would bring it home when they finished. Whatever was left, she would bring it home. And well, it was just, you know, that was how life was then. So it was fine. Then, you know, everybody said we did. Eventually, there was a uptake of everybody having to move from Southside, and we went several areas. My family moved over to the east side of town now. Well, I guess it was the east side of town then, and we had the opportunity to move in one of the housing projects on the east side, Martin Homes. And it was upstairs, downstairs, inside, you know, facilities. And there was no AC. Well, we didn't have any on Southside either, but we had these big fans. And I remember when we moved over there, that was our first actual TV. And I think we all kind of enjoyed that. I never forget, we were all on Sunday. Well, we only had so many channels that you could watch. I may think it was, we had rabbit ears. Well, I'm not sure if y'all know about the rabbit ears that you put on top of the TV. Now, maybe someone is not familiar with that, but it's a little set, and they look like rabbit ears. And I never forget, we watched the Ed Sullivan Show. And sometimes our favorite entertainers would come on, and we had a great time watching them. But we did have a radio. And I do remember we had one radio, but I remember my grandmother allowing us to listen to I think it was called Randy's Market or Randy's, it was a show that they played all the latest records coming out of Muscle Shoals. Muscle Shoals is in Alabama. But, and occasionally we had a chance to go buy some of those little 45 records that we enjoyed. And we had a great time listening and dancing to some of the little 45 records that we purchased. But we only could hear the music from the Muscle Shoals. It was coming out. I forgot this guy name. He was a great guy. He was a great announcer. He would make everything sound so good. And my sister and I said, we're going to go to Muscle Shoals one day. But I don't think we ever went to Muscle Shoals one day. But I don't think we didn't go to Muscle Shoals. But we did purchase a lot of the music from muscle shows. There was this place, it was called Dixie. Well, it still is called Dixie. There was a music store there that you could go in, and sometime we would buy, we had to always have the latest. And sometimes we bought something that wasn't the latest, and we just enjoyed dancing and having good times, listening to the music, and we all practiced the latest dance moves. It was, I guess it was the twist. Maybe don't know anything about the twist, but and several other dances that we would practice. And while we were living also on the east side of town in Martin Homes, there was we lived right next to the railroad track, and on the other side of the railroad track was Lincoln Community Center. Maybe it's not called Lincoln Community Center now, but anyway, they had certain nights, they had dances over there. My mom would allow us to go over there because it was only in walking distance. Really, it was maybe just a few feet. But we were allowed to go. We got all our chores to do, everything to do. You had to work so hard to get that pleasure to go over there. All the ironing had to be done, and the curtains had to be put back up to the window. After it was washed, they were washed and cleaned, and floors, walls, back then you didn't put your hands on the walls had to be washed. But when all that was finished and it met my grandmother's inspection, you could go over to Lincoln Community Center, and you could dance with your classmates, and we just had a good time over there at Lincoln Community Center.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Marty, did you have a question about the type house they live in?
About what?
The type house they live in, how many people?
Yeah. Could you describe your house in Southside?
When we lived two places. I remember. I was born at 605 West Franklin Street. That house was a big house because it was 5 siblings. My dad, when he was there, my grandmother, and my mom lived there. We had a full function where you came up on the porch. The bathroom was on the outside of the kitchen. You came into a kitchen. It was a huge kitchen. I remember there was this big stove, and we had this huge table in there. I guess, yeah, it was a table. And we had maybe 2 chairs, but there was this bench that the kids sat on. 2 or 3 of the kids sat on one side of the bench, and the other kids sat on the other side of the bench. But I never forget, it was a big room. It was a big kitchen. It had this big stove, and I liked going because my grandmother made tea cakes and all kind of good sweet cakes. And then there was about 2 bedrooms. And then there was another room that was supposed to be, I guess, a living room, but it was never used at that. My grandmother had this big, huge, and then we had big beds. They were huge beds. I guess they were like king-size bed now or whatever. But anyway, this one room, it was pretty. It had all lace. She had little doilies on everything, and I thought, well, I'm gonna have me some doilies when I grow up. But and it had this big bed in there. It had chenille bedspread. It was just, I thought it was real nice. And we had company. They slept in the big room in there. So I said, you know, we had family members to come visit. They would sleep in the room with the pretty chenille bedspreads and the doilies on the dresser and pretty lamps and things like that. But it was a big house, had several rooms, and it had a big yard because there was no grass in the yard. We had brooms, but it wasn't brooms that you go to store and buy brooms. It was brooms that we made, that my parents made. I'm not sure and the yards had to be cleaned every day. Summer, it didn't matter. Winter, the yards had to be cleaned. And that was somebody's job, I think one of the younger kids, to clean the yards. And she would come out and inspect, and he did a good job on both sides of the house. And everything was spotless. There was no dishes left unclean, tucked away, put where they were supposed to be put. There was a place for everything, and everything had to be in its place. Kitchen, bedroom, even though we shared bedrooms, my sister and I shared a bed, and I think my brothers shared one. But everything was in its place. You know, there was nothing out, sometimes a little bit too much out of place. I think my grandmother was a little bit, my mom lived there, but basically my grandmother was the matriarch of everybody. She took care of, I think she had a little OCD too, but you couldn't leave anything out. Sometimes you forgot toys or whatever. Oh, no, they had to be put away, whatever. You know, kids gonna be kids. But no. Everything had to be in its place. So that was just about how the house was. And like someone else had said, there was actually no visiting, you know, or we could only visit some people in the neighborhood. We couldn't visit everyone in the neighborhood, even though we went to school together, went to church together, but you only visit certain homes in the neighborhood.
Did you have another question, Marty?
No.
Okay, all right, that's good. What
Okay.
I want to do now
Yes.
is get y'all at a table.
That too much?
No, that's fine.